something that was very prominent in the early church. So many people in the early church that came into the church were adults, and there was a long process for their entry into the church. And the council wanted to see this re-implemented. It says, this catechumenate for adults comprising several distinct steps is to be restored and brought about in each diocese. And so you're probably familiar with it here on how it works. That's something that has been implemented rather well in the decades after the council, at least restoring this whole idea and bringing people into the church in a more programmatic, systematic way. The next chapter is on the divine office, which is called the Liturgy of the Hours, that all priests and religious are bound to pray throughout the day. But one thing of note is that the Constitution says pastors of souls should see to it that the principal hours, especially Vespers, which is evening prayer, are celebrated in common in parish churches on Sundays and on the more solemn feasts. Also, the laity are encouraged to recite the divine office either with the priests or among themselves or even individually. So the public liturgy of the church principally is composed of two things, the Mass and the Liturgy of the Hours. The sacraments, all the sacraments, but the daily liturgical life of the church centers around these two things, the Mass and the Liturgy of the Hours. Most Catholics know nothing at all about the Liturgy of the Hours, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful part of the church's liturgical life, a way to sanctify all the hours of the day, to pray the Psalms, to pray the church's official prayer given to us in the Scripture. The next chapter is on the liturgical year, and in one paragraph, the Council Fathers say that the Lord's Day, Sunday, is the original feast day, and it should be proposed to the faithful and taught to them so that it may become, in fact, a day of joy and freedom from work. Other celebrations, unless they be truly of the greatest importance, shall not have precedence over Sunday, which is the foundation and kernel of the whole liturgical year. Now, chapter 6 is one of my favorites. It is on sacred music. The first line of this chapter says that the musical tradition of the universal church is a treasure of inestimable value, greater even than that of any other art. The main reason for this preeminence is that as a combination of sacred music and words, it forms a necessary or integral part of the solemn liturgy. So music in the liturgy is meant completely to be at the service of the sacred texts, to clothe them, if you will, with beauty, to help them shine forth and be imprinted upon our hearts and minds. And for that reason, it has a preeminence over all the other forms of art that are brought into use in the Church's liturgy. Number 116 of Sacrosanctum Concilium reads, "The Church recognizes Gregorian chant as being specially suited to the Roman liturgy. Therefore, it should be given pride of place in liturgical services. Other kinds of sacred music, especially polyphony, are by no means excluded from liturgical celebrations so long as they accord with the spirit of the liturgical action." So the Council did not at all intend that the great patrimony of the Church's musical tradition, which is comprised principally of Gregorian chant, would be done away with or forgotten or put on the back shelf. The Council makes room for new expressions of sacred music, but it upholds Gregorian chant as having pride of place. That this is a form of music we could talk on and on about this itself, but it's a form of music specially suited to the liturgy, to the sacred liturgy, and it has a privileged place in the Church's life. So we can be glad that in these days, particularly Pope Benedict, you might know, is particularly interested in the sacred liturgy and the sacred music. He himself is a musician, a very accomplished pianist. Supposedly, he sits down for a half an hour every night, at the same time, of course, in his German schedule, and plays Mozart. He loves Mozart. But he has a very deep appreciation for Gregorian chant and is seeking to help renew its place in the life of the church. Then lastly, the last chapter is on sacred art and sacred furnishings. The practice of placing sacred images in churches so that they may be venerated by the faithful is to be maintained. Nevertheless, their number should be moderate, and their relative positions should reflect right order. So many times after the Second Vatican Councils, church architecture or church art began to take on a form that was really completely foreign to the history of church architecture and art. And this is not something that becomes last form. Again, the Council is open to new expressions, new developments, but never in a way that is just cut off from the past. Everything that came before is bad. We have to start from scratch and make everything look like what it didn't look like before, etc. So it says that the use of sacred images is to be maintained. Why don't we take a break, then we'll have questions, and then just some concluding remarks. By the way,